The first rays of dawn spilled like liquid gold across Silver Creek's dusty main street, lighting up a lone rider leading his big-boned stallion toward the livery. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Clay Maddox walked with a steady, unhurried stride, the weariness of 3 hard weeks on the trail hidden beneath broad shoulders and a sure step. Women paused in their morning chores, stealing glances at the tall cowboy, whose quiet grin had become a small legend across Colorado territory. It was 1876, and Silver Creek was booming with railroad riches and restless newcomers. Clay had come to town with little more than his horse, his colts, and a reputation as one of the fastest draws west of the Mississippi. What no one expected was the warmth of his smile, easy, unguarded, the kind that could make even the most proper lady's heart skip. Every unmarried woman in Silver Creek had tried to catch his eye, yet Clay stayed courteous and distant, accepting supper invitations only to decline proposals with gentlemanly grace. What no one guessed was that Clay Maddox's heart already belonged elsewhere, though he had barely exchanged a dozen words with the woman who held it. Ruby Lane, sweeping the porch of her late father Silas Lane's general store, caught sight of him. At 22, she was already labeled a spinster by town gossips, not for lack of beauty with chestnut hair and steady green eyes, but because she guarded her independence and her father's legacy with quiet determination. She looked up just as Clay passed. For a breath, their eyes met, and the easy grin he offered others softened into something shy and private, making Ruby's heart stumble. She managed a small nod before ducking back to her broom, hoping he hadn't noticed the blush warming her cheeks. Clay tipped his hat, speaking low, so only she could hear. "Morning, Miss Lane." "Mr. Maddox," she answered without lifting her gaze. "Welcome back to Silver Creek." He seemed about to say more, but a sudden burst of footsteps interrupted. Rose Pike, the mayor's lively daughter, hurried up with a sparkle that bordered on boldness. "Mr. Maddox, you're back. Mother and I were just saying we hoped you'd join us for supper tonight. Father has a business proposal he'd like to share." Clay stepped back politely. "Good morning, Miss Pike. I'm afraid I've just come off a long drive, maybe another time." Rose pouted prettily. "But we've been planning this for weeks. Surely you can spare one evening." Ruby kept sweeping through every word pricked her ears. She had seen this scene play out before, Clay being pursued, then gently turning someone down. "I'm sorry," Miss Pike, Clay said firmly. "My first duty is to tend my horse and get some rest. Please give your parents my regards." He tipped his hat once more and strode toward the livery, leaving Rose disappointed. Yet as he walked away, he cast one last look not at Rose, but back toward Ruby. She pretended not to notice, though her heartbeat quickened. By afternoon, the summer sun blazed down while Ruby sorted the new goods from the morning train. The shop bell jingled, and Nettie Brooks, the banker's wife, swept in with her usual air of importance. "Good afternoon, Nettie," Ruby greeted, wiping her hands on her apron. "What can I get for you today?" "Just some thread, dear, and perhaps a bit of news." Nettie's eyes sparkled as she leaned on the counter. "I saw Clay Maddox is back in town. Handsome, isn't he?" Ruby kept her face neutral. "I suppose many women think so." Nettie gave a soft laugh. "Every single woman in Silver Creek is positively beside herself when he rides in. And rumor has it he turned down Rose Pike again this morning. Can you imagine, the mayor's daughter, and she's hardly the first. He's declined dinners from the Hendersons, the clerk's even wealthy widow Johnson. Folks say maybe he has a sweetheart back east, or maybe he's running from something. A man that handsome with no interest in settling down, it's unnatural." Ruby handed her the thread. "That will be 15 cents, please." As Nettie counted the coins, she added with a pointed smile, "You know, Ruby 22 is practically spinsterhood around here. You should come to the Founders' Day dance. Young Finn Doyle has been asking about you." "Thank you for the thought," Ruby said lightly. "But the store keeps me busy. All work and no fun isn't healthy, Nettie chided gently, then departed with the bell jingling in her wake. Ruby exhaled, returning to her stock. Silver Creek might see her as a spinster shopkeeper, and that was fine. No one needed to know about the quiet dreams that sometimes kept her awake at night. Another ring of the bell stopped her short. Her practiced shopkeeper's smile froze when she saw Clay Maddox filling the doorway. Hat in hand, sunlight striking his sandy gold hair. "Miss Lane," he said. "Mr. Maddox." She tucked a stray lock behind her ear. "What can I get for you today?" Clay stepped inside Spurs, giving a soft jingle on the wooden floor. "Trail's been long. I need supplies. Coffee beans, salt, and maybe some of those raspberry preserves you keep if there's any left." Clay Maddox moved toward the counter with an easy steadiness, every step carrying the quiet confidence of a man shaped by long trails and hard sun. Up close, Ruby Lane caught the fine weathered lines at the corners of his eyes and heard the soft jingle of his spurs. "And maybe some of that raspberry jam you keep," he added with a faint smile. "If you still have it." Ruby paused, surprised. "You remember that best I've ever tasted? Reminds me of home." A warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the summer heat. "Where is home, Mr. Maddox? If you don't mind me asking." Clay looked down at his hat, turning it slowly in his hands. "Tennessee. Haven't set foot there in 10 years. Long time to stay away." Ruby wrapped the preserves carefully. He studied her a moment longer, then said quietly, "Home isn't always a place." Almost as if catching himself, he straightened. "I'll need some .44 caliber shells, too." She fetched a box from under the counter. When their fingers brushed, a sudden spark leapt through her, though she willed her face to stay calm. "Anything else?" she asked evenly. Clay hesitated, as if more words waited, then simply shook his head. "That'll do. $2.35, she said, tallying the order. He set down the exact coins, gathered his supplies, and reached the door, then paused. "Miss Lane." "Yes, Mr. Maddox. Would you be at the Founders' Day dance next weekend?" The question startled her. I hadn't planned on it, no." A flicker of disappointment crossed his face. "I see. Well, good day to you then." "Good day, Mr. Maddox." The bell gave a sharp jingle as he stepped out. Ruby stood motionless long after the door closed, wondering if she'd only imagined that exchange. The next few days blurred with customers and endless shelves to restock. Still, every time the bell chimed, she caught herself looking up, only to find someone else and feel a quiet stab of disappointment. Late Thursday afternoon, just as she was latching the door, her dearest friend Lila Boone burst in, eyes shining. "Ruby Lane. Why didn't you tell me?" Lila demanded, planting her fists on her hips. Ruby blinked. "Tell you what?" "About Clay Maddox," Lila exclaimed, as if it were obvious. "The whole town's buzzing. He's been asking questions about you." A cold flutter ran through Ruby. "Questions? What do you mean?" "First he asked my father at the livery, then Marshal Troy Beck, and even Della Frost at the bakery. Wants to know everything, how long you've run this store, if you've got kin elsewhere, whether you're—" Lila wiggled her brows. "Spoken for." Ruby sank onto a stool, her heart racing. That can't be right. Mr. Maddox hardly knows me." "Well, it seems he wants to fix that." Lila pulled up a chair, her teasing softening into warmth. "Ruby, this is Clay Maddox. We're talking about the man every woman in Silver Creek would give anything to court. And he's looking your way." "There must be some mistake," Ruby murmured, though a small, reckless hope stirred inside her. "Maybe he's just being friendly." Friendly, Lila snorted. "Friendly doesn't mean asking the marshal if you've ever been in trouble with the law." He did what Ruby's eyes widened. Relax, Lila laughed. Marshal Beck told him you're the most law-abiding soul in the territory. Don't you see? He's treating you like a mystery he wants to solve. Ruby shook her head, fighting the hope that tried to grow roots. Even if that were true, what could a man like Clay Maddox want with me? He could have any woman in town. Maybe that's the point, Lila said, suddenly serious. You're the only one who hasn't been chasing him since the day he rode in. That thought lingered long after Lila left. That night, Ruby lay awake in her small apartment above the store, letting herself imagine just for a heartbeat what life might be like if Clay truly cared. The idea thrilled and frightened her in equal measure. She'd heard whispers that he had once worn a badge, that he'd worked as a hired gun for rich ranchers, maybe even walked on the wrong side of the law. Nobody knew for sure, and Clay never spoke of it. What folks did know was that he was quick with a revolver and kinder than most men dared to be. Ruby pulled the blanket close. Men like Clay Maddox didn't settle down with shopkeepers. Sooner or later he'd ride on, and she'd still be here minding her store, living the life she'd chosen. Yet as sleep finally took her, she remembered how his smile softened when their eyes met, gentle, unguarded, as though meant for her alone. Friday morning broke clear and blazing. Ruby had barely unlocked the door when Marshal Troy Beck stepped onto her porch hat in hand and face grave. "Morning, Miss Lane," he said. "Got a moment to talk?" Ruby's heart jumped. "Of course, Marshal. Has something happened to Mr. Maddox?" "No, ma'am. But I figured you ought to know, trouble's brewing." Her relief turned to unease. What kind of trouble? The Iron Dust Riders were spotted near Silver Springs. "Word is they're headed this way." Ruby's mouth went dry. Even in a land used to outlaws, that name chilled the blood. Led by the ruthless Flint Mercer, they'd terrorized Colorado for years, robbing banks, torching homesteads, leaving no witnesses. "Why here?" she whispered. "The Army payroll train comes through tomorrow," Beck said heavily. $30,000 in hard cash. We kept the news quiet, but somehow, word leaked. Marshal Troy Beck said, tightening the leather of his gun belt. Ruby Lane's stomach knotted. "Can't the train be delayed? Already tried. The Army says the payroll run stays on schedule." He drew a deep breath. "I've deputized extra men and we'll be ready, but I wanted to warn you myself. The bank sits right across from your store. If there's shooting, you could be in the middle of it." "I understand," Ruby replied, her voice trembling despite her effort to steady it. "Thank you for telling me." Beck settled his hat back on. "Maybe nothing will come of it, but if you hear gunfire tomorrow, get down on the floor and stay there. Don't try to be brave." When he left, Ruby stood frozen in the quiet shop, heart hammering. The Iron Dust Riders here in Silver Creek. The thought chilled her to the bone. The bell above the door suddenly rang, jolting her. Clay Maddox stepped inside, his face dark with concern, as he closed the door behind him. "I'm guessing Marshal Beck already talked to you," he said. "Yes," she managed. "About the Iron Dust Riders." Clay moved closer, lowering his voice. "I want you to lock this place up tomorrow. Stay in your apartment upstairs and keep away from the windows." "I can't just close," she protested. "Saturday's my busiest day, and the marshal said they might not even come." "They'll come," Clay answered with a certainty that sent a shiver through her. "I know Flint Mercer. If he's heard about that payroll, nothing will keep him away." Ruby studied his face and saw a hard edge where his usual warmth had been. "You know him?" Clay hesitated, then exhaled. "We rode together years ago before he became what he is now." The words stunned her. "Clay Maddox, an outlaw. You were part of his gang." "No," Clay said quickly. "We both worked as hired guns for the Carlisle Ranch during the Red Mesa Riders' range wars. After that, we chose different trails. I stayed with the law, he didn't. Relief washed over Ruby, but curiosity followed close behind. "Is that why you came to Silver Creek? Because of the payroll, gnome, I came here for." He stopped, reconsidering. "That's not what matters. What matters is keeping you safe. Flint Mercer doesn't leave witnesses, Ruby." It was the first time he'd spoken her name so intimately, and despite the danger, her heart fluttered. "I can't hide while everyone else is in danger," she insisted. "This store is my father Silas Lane's legacy. I won't abandon it." Clay ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "Your father wouldn't want you to die for a building, Ruby. It's not just a building," she shot back. "It's my life, everything I've worked for." They stood locked in silence until Clay finally said, "All right. If you won't leave, I'll stay here with you. What tomorrow, I'll be here in the store. If Mercer and his riders show, I'll make sure you're protected." Ruby shook her head. "The marshal will need you. You just said you know Mercer. Beck has his deputies. My priority is keeping you safe." The iron in his voice made her breath catch. Why, she whispered. "Why me?" For a moment, he looked almost uncertain. Then he stepped closer, close enough for her to catch the scent of clean leather and sun on his shirt. "Because from the first moment I rode into Silver Creek and saw you sweeping this porch with that look of quiet grit, I knew you were different." His tone dropped to a rough, reverent murmur. "For 6 months I've been coming here buying things I didn't need, just to trade a few words with you. 6 months of every other woman in town trying to catch my eye while the only one I wanted barely looked my way." Ruby's heart pounded so hard she was sure he could hear it. "I noticed," she admitted softly. "I always noticed." A rare, gentle smile touched his face, the kind that weakened her knees. "Then let me protect you tomorrow. Please." She nodded, words failing her, as she realized the feeling she had guarded so long was shared. Clay reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "I'll be here at dawn," he promised. "Lock the door behind me when I leave tonight. Don't open it for anyone you don't know." "I won't," she said. He lingered a heartbeat longer, as if there was more he wanted to say, then stepped back. "Until tomorrow, then." Ruby watched him go, her mind spinning with all he had confessed. Clay Maddox cared for her, had been watching, noticing for months, and tomorrow they would face real danger together. Sleep was impossible that night. She tossed and turned, haunted by flashes of gunfire and by memories of Clay's quiet words, his gentle touch. When the first light of dawn finally reached the rooftops, she dressed carefully in a simple blue dress, every movement deliberate as she steadied her nerves. Right on time, Clay arrived. She let him in and bolted the door behind him. He looked different this morning. Gone was the friendly cowboy whose easy grin charmed the town. In his place stood a hardened gunman, 2 Colt revolvers riding his hips and a Winchester cradled in his hand. His eyes swept the room in a soldier's quick assessment. "We'll move the counter," he said without preamble. "Make a barricade in case they break in." Together they shoved heavy furniture across the floor, building a makeshift stronghold in the corner farthest from the windows. Clay Maddox set himself where he could watch both the front door and the stretch of dusty street beyond the windows. "The Army payroll hits town at noon," he said quietly. "If Flint Mercer is coming, that's when he'll strike." Ruby Lane forced her trembling hands to keep moving as she stacked goods behind their improvised barricade. What if they really do show? Clay's jaw tightened. "Marshal Troy Beck and his men will try to block them, but there'll be shooting." His blue eyes locked on hers. "When it starts, you stay down. No matter what you hear, no matter what happens to me, you stay hidden until it's over." "Until it's over," she echoed, the meaning sinking in. "Clay, I can't just let you—" "You can, and you will," he cut in, then softened his tone. "I've spent too many years making bad choices running when I should have stood and fought. This time I'm doing something that matters. You matter." Her breath caught. "To me too," she whispered, touching his arm. Emotion darkened his eyes. He covered her hand with his own. Then that's one more reason we both walk out of this alive. Time dragged like cold molasses. Ruby kept the closed sign on the door, but lit lamps so the store didn't look abandoned. By mid-morning, the town had gone unnervingly still. Most shops stayed shuttered. Only Marshal Beck and his deputies showed themselves posted like sentinels along Main Street. "They're coming," Clay said suddenly, his gaze fixed outside. "Riders from the east." Ruby started toward the window, but he pulled her back. "Stay low." Her heart pounded as she strained to listen. Then she heard the distant rumble of hard-ridden horses. How many, she breathed. "At least 10, Clay replied, checking his revolvers and the Winchester slung nearby. More than Beck expected, the thunder of hooves grew until shouts erupted outside Marshal Beck's commanding bark, answered by rough, threatening voices. Down Clay ordered, dropping to the edge of their barricade. Ruby had barely hit her knees when gunfire shattered the window. Glass sprayed the floor in deadly shards. Bullets ripped through the walls, splintering wood. She clamped her hands over her ears and prayed while Clay's return fire cracked like rolling thunder. Outside, chaos reigned, men shouting horses, screaming shots, echoing from every side. "Stay down!" Clay yelled over the storm of noise. Ruby pressed into the floorboards, heart hammering. Life on the frontier had never been gentle, but she had never known terror like this, the methodical destruction of everything she had built. Then a sudden hush fell, broken by a harsh voice from the street. "Maddox, Clay." "Maddox, I know you're in there." Clay's shoulders stiffened. "Mercer," he muttered. "Come out, Maddox," the outlaw called. "Or we burn the place with you inside." Clay glanced back at Ruby, conflict written in his face. "If I go out there—" "No," she said fiercely, clutching his arm. "You said yourself he doesn't leave witnesses. He'll kill you and come for me next." "Your lady friend's right," Mercer taunted as if he could hear them. "But maybe we can strike a deal. You've got something I want. I've got something you want." Ruby frowned in confusion. What's he talking about? Clay's expression darkened. "I don't know." A second voice rang out, female, terrified, achingly familiar. "Ruby, help me." Ruby's blood turned to ice. "Lila," she gasped. Clay tightened his grip on his rifle. "It's a trick. They want to draw us out." "Please," Lila's voice broke on a sob. "They're going to kill me." Tears burned Ruby's eyes. "We can't let them hurt her. She has nothing to do with this." "No one's innocent to Flint, Mercer," Clay said grimly. "But you're right. We can't leave her with him." He drew a long breath, decision settling in his eyes. "I'm going out." "No." Ruby grabbed him harder. "He'll kill you. Not right away." Clay holstered one revolver but kept the other ready. "He'll want to talk first, show off. That'll buy Marshal Beck time to regroup, maybe flank them." He looked down at her, his voice softening. "I need you to stay hidden. If I get Lila free, I'll send her inside. Barricade the door behind her. And what about you?" Ruby's tears spilled unchecked. Clay cupped her face in his calloused hand, gently brushing a tear away with his thumb. "I'll come back to you. I promise." Before she could speak, he bent and kissed her a swift, urgent kiss that tasted of gunpowder and all the words they hadn't spoken. Then he turned toward the shattered window. "I'm coming out, Mercer," he called. "Don't hurt the girl." Ruby watched in dread as Clay climbed through the broken frame, his revolver dangling harmlessly from one finger. From her hiding place, she glimpsed a knot of mounted men in the street, one of them gripping a struggling Lila. "Well, well," a mocking drawl answered Flint Mercer's unmistakable voice. "Clay Maddox. Been a long time." "Let the girl go, Mercer," Clay said evenly. She's not part of this. Part of what Mercer laughed, cold and sharp. The 10 grand you lifted from me in Durango. Or maybe the bullet you put in my brother Rex Dugan's back. Ruby's breath caught. What was Mercer talking about? Your brother Drew first, Clay said flatly. And that money wasn't yours to begin with. You stole it from the orphanage fund, Flint. Mercer sneered, his voice carrying like a whip crack, always playing the righteous one. Even back when you rode with us, you had to act better than the rest. A taut silence followed. Then Mercer barked, "Drop the iron. Maddox, all of it." From her hiding spot, Ruby Lane watched Clay Maddox carefully lay his revolver on the ground, then his second Colt and the Winchester. Now Mercer went on. You're going to tell me where that cash is stashed, or I'll put a bullet in this pretty senorita's head. Don't tell him anything. Lila Boone cried, earning a vicious shake from the outlaw holding her. Ruby's mind whirled. Hidden money. Was that why Clay had come to Silver Creek? Had everything he told her been a lie? The money's gone. Mercer. Clay said, his voice steady. Every cent went back to the orphanage where it belonged. Silence. Then Mercer laughed a dark, amused sound. You expect me to believe that you, the famous hired gun, suddenly grew a saint's heart. Believe what you want. It's the truth. Mercer's voice turned to ice. Then I guess the girl dies. Wait, Clay shouted. Take me instead. Let her go and I'll go with you. Take all the time you want for your revenge. Ruby's pulse thundered. She couldn't let him throw his life away. Her eyes fell on the shotgun Clay had stashed behind the counter. With shaking hands, she reached for it. Outside, Mercer seemed to savor the moment. You always were a sentimental fool, Maddox. But I'll admit, the thought of watching you suffer has appeal. Then we have a deal, Clay pressed. The girl walks free. I suppose Mercer began, but gunfire erupted before he could finish. Shots rained from rooftops and alleyways. Marshal Troy Beck and his deputies, who had silently shifted their positions, now unleashed a deadly crossfire. Chaos exploded. Ruby heard Lila scream, then saw her break free as her captor pitched from his saddle, felled by a deputy's bullet. Clay lunged for his discarded weapons, rolling as slugs hissed past. Clutching the shotgun, Ruby froze until the back door crashed open. 2 iron dust riders burst in, seeking cover from the deputy's fire. They stopped short at the sight of her crouched behind the counter, shotgun leveled. Time slowed. One yanked a pistol, but Ruby squeezed both triggers before thought could catch up. The blast kicked her backward. Smoke filled the air. One outlaw crumpled instantly. The other dove behind a shelf. Ruby Clay's voice cut through the din. Back here, she cried, fumbling to reload. Before she could, the second outlaw charged, knife flashing. Ruby stumbled, skirts tangling, and fell, the empty shotgun clattering away. Nowhere to run, Missy, the man growled, knife poised. A single shot cracked. The outlaw froze, eyes wide, then fell lifeless at her feet. Clay stood in the doorway, revolver smoking. Are you hurt? He demanded, crossing the room in 2 strides. No, Ruby said, voice trembling. I'm fine. His hands moved over her arms, making sure she was whole. Mercer's down, Marshal Beck got him. It's over. The words took a heartbeat to sink in. Over. They were alive. Ruby sagged against him, the adrenaline draining away. He caught her easily, holding her close. You saved my life, she whispered. And you saved mine, Clay replied, voice rough. That shotgun blast broke Mercer's aim and gave me my shot. Ruby lifted her eyes, still full of questions. The money? The orphanage? Was that all true? Clay guided her to a chair that had somehow stayed upright amid the wreckage. He exhaled deeply. Every word. Years ago, I rode with Mercer for a short spell. I was young and angry, hunting for a place to belong. But when he robbed that orphanage in Durango, took every cent from those children, I couldn't stomach it. I stole the money back while they were celebrating, returned it, and ran. Been dodging Mercer ever since. And that's why you came to Silver Creek still running. The thought pricked her heart. At first he admitted. But then I saw you. And I stopped wanting to run. His eyes met hers, unguarded, sincere. For the first time, I found something worth staying for. Someone worth staying for. The confession hung in the air, rich with unspoken promise. Before Ruby could answer, the front door swung open. Marshal Troy Beck stepped in, with Lila at his side, her face streaked with tears but alive. Ruby, Lila cried, rushing to embrace her friend. "Thank the Lord you're safe." Beck surveyed the wreckage, his weathered face grave. "Flint Mercer's dead, 5 of his iron dust riders with him. The rest threw down their guns." His gaze moved to the 2 bodies on Ruby's floor. "I see you handled things in here, Mr. Maddox." "Ruby saved my life," Clay said, his arm settling protectively around her. "And he saved mine," Ruby added, still trying to steady her breathing. A faint smile touched Beck's lips. "The Army payroll's safe. Train never even reached the station we warned them, and they switched to Fort Collins." He let out a long breath as he looked over the bullet-scarred store. "The town's got some rebuilding ahead," Marshal Troy Beck said quietly, surveying the bullet-scarred storefront. Ruby Lane followed his gaze to the splintered shelves, shattered windows, and goods strewn like autumn leaves across the floor. Months of labor ruined in minutes. The weight of it pressed hard on her chest. "We'll help you put it back together," Lila Boone promised, squeezing Ruby's hand. "Everyone will. Silver Creek takes care of its own." "That's right," Beck agreed. "After what happened here, there isn't a soul in town who won't pitch in." Clay Maddox's hand tightened gently on Ruby's shoulder. "If you'll allow it." "Miss Lane, I'd like to be first to help rebuild your store." The formal words weren't lost on anyone. Clay was giving her a choice, showing respect for her independence, even after all they'd shared in danger. Ruby looked up at the man who had been ready to give his life for a town that scarcely knew him, and for a woman he'd barely spoken to during 6 months of shy glances and careful smiles. Her answer came clear and steady. "I'd welcome that, Mr. Maddox," she said softly, laying her own hand over his. "More than you know." The days that followed blurred with hammering and sweeping nails and laughter. Just as Beck predicted, the prairie settlers of Silver Creek rallied. Neighbors carried boards, scrubbed soot, and righted toppled shelves. Clay worked side by side with them from dawn until long after the lamps were lit. One dusky evening, a week later, Ruby found herself alone with him as he set the last pane into a new front window. They had spoken little about the kiss they'd shared in the gunfire, or his raw confession of feeling. Yet the quiet between them had grown easy, threaded with something warmer. "The store looks better than before," she said at last. Clay turned with that slow, unguarded smile that still sent her heart into a flutter. "It does, though I suspect Nettie Brooks is disappointed you skipped her idea for a ladies' hat corner." Ruby laughed. "One battle at a time." He set his tools aside and wiped his hands on a rag. "Speaking of battles, there's something I need to tell you." Her pulse quickened. "Oh, Marshal Beck offered me a badge deputy." Ruby blinked. "A deputy? With everything in your past?" "He knows it," Clay said quietly. "I told him everything after the shootout. Said he'd rather have a man who's stared darkness in the eye than one who's never faced it. But it means staying here. For good." Hope bloomed in Ruby's chest, careful and bright. "Is that what you want to stay?" Clay stepped closer, until the flecks of gold in his blue eyes caught the lamplight. "What I want is to wake each morning knowing I'll see you, to court you proper if you'll have me, to build something real and honest for the first time in my life." Her breath caught. "Clay, I know it's sudden," he pressed, gently. "We've only traded stolen moments. My past is tangled, but when I thought I might lose you in that fight, I knew I couldn't wait any longer to speak my heart." He took her hands, rough and warm. "I love you, Ruby Lane. Truth is, I think I've loved you since that first morning I saw you sweeping your porch looking like the sunrise itself." A mist of tears blurred her vision. "I was wearing blue," she whispered. He chuckled softly. "Then I still have much to learn: your favorite color, how you take your tea, what makes you laugh or cry. And I want to learn it all if you'll let me. You already have my trust," Ruby said, voice trembling with joy. "And my love. I never saw anyone else," he answered simply. "Only you." When he kissed her this time, there was no panic, no echo of gunfire, only the sure promise of a life to share. 2 weeks later, the postponed Founders' Day dance filled the new town hall with music and lamplight. Ruby entered on Clay's arm, draped in a deep green gown she'd secretly ordered from Denver. A low murmur rippled through the crowd, Silver Creek's most sought-after cowboy, and the steadfast shopkeeper who had won his heart. "Everyone's staring," Ruby whispered, cheeks warming. "Let them," Clay replied, his hand steady at the small of her back. "They're just jealous I get to dance with the prettiest woman here." Rose Pike approached her, smile polite but tight. "Deputy Maddox," she said, acknowledging his new title. "Miss Lane, how fine to see you both," Miss Pike, Clay said with easy courtesy. "You look splendid this evening." "Thank you." Rose's glance flicked between them. "I must admit, you two have surprised the whole town, such an unexpected match. The best things in life usually are," Clay replied, his arm firm around Ruby's waist. Rose's smile never quite reached her eyes. "Indeed. Well, enjoy the dance." She drifted off to speak with the banker's son. "That wasn't so bad," Ruby murmured. "The worst is over," Clay said, guiding her toward the floor. "Once folks realized I wasn't here out of guilt or charity, the matchmakers had to admit defeat." The fiddle struck up a waltz. Clay faced her, one hand claiming hers, the other settling at her waist. "May I have this dance, Miss Lane?" "You may, Deputy Maddox," she answered. Her heart alight as he drew her into the music and the promise of a shared forever. As they glided across the dance floor, Ruby Lane marveled at how natural it felt to be held in Clay Maddox's arms, like they'd been made to fit together. The curious stares of the prairie settlers blurred into nothing until it seemed the two of them were alone in the world. "You're a better dancer than I expected," she teased, as he guided her through a graceful turn. "My mother insisted on lessons back in Tennessee," he admitted with a grin. "Said no son of hers was going to crush a lady's toes at a social." Ruby smiled. "I'll have to thank her someday." The words slipped out, and a blush quickly followed. Clay's blue eyes deepened with feeling. "I'd like that for you to meet her. She'd love you, I reckon. You haven't seen her in 10 years, you said?" "I right," he answered softly. "Not as often as I should, but she knows I'm alive." He spun her through another perfect turn. "I sent a letter last week, told her about you, about the deputy badge, about how I'm finally hanging my hat for good." The thought of Clay sharing their story with his family filled Ruby with a joy so bright it almost hurt. "I'd like to meet her too," she whispered. As the waltz ended, Clay surprised her by not letting go of her hand. He led her through the lively hall to the balcony where cool night air wrapped around them. The stars glittered across the Colorado sky, a crescent moon spilling soft silver over the valley. "I had a whole speech planned," he said quietly, a slight tremor in his voice. "But now I can't remember a word of it." "Clay, Her heart raced. He drew a steadying breath, then dropped to one knee, still holding her hand. Ruby Lane. I know we haven't known each other long, and folks might call this rushing, but when a man's been running as long as I have, he knows when he's finally found home. From his pocket, he drew a small ring. I'm not a rich man. This belonged to my grandmother. My mother sent it when I wrote about you. Ruby, will you marry me? Will you let me stand beside you for the rest of our days? I promise to love you with everything I am. Tears blurred Ruby's vision. Yes, Clay, I'll marry you. The smile he gave her, soft and certain, the one meant only for her, lit his face as he slipped the simple gold and pearl band onto her finger. Then he rose and kissed her, sealing a lifetime of tomorrows in that moment. I love you, Ruby Lane, soon to be Ruby Maddox, he whispered. I love you too, she breathed, her heart overflowing. My cowboy, my home. By morning, word of their engagement had raced through Silver Creek like prairie fire. Everyone knew that Clay Maddox, the man whose smile had set every unattached heart fluttering, had given that smile and his heart to the quiet shopkeeper who had never joined the chase. Some were startled, others claimed they'd seen it coming, but all agreed on one thing: the way Clay looked at Ruby told the whole story. 3 crisp autumn months later, they married in Silver Creek's small white church. Neighbors packed the pews and lined the walls to witness their vows. Clay, more nervous than he'd ever been facing down outlaws, lost every trace of fear when Ruby appeared in ivory lace, radiant as sunrise. With steady voices, they promised to cherish each other for life, a vow Clay meant to keep with every breath. The years rolled on, bringing change and growth to the town. The railroad expanded, more settlers arrived, and the Maddox mercantile run side by Ruby and Clay flourished. They even added a ladies' hat section at Nettie Brooks's happy insistence. Ada Maddox visited the following spring, staying 3 months, and weaving a bond with Ruby so close that parting was hard for them both. True to her promise, Ada returned when Ruby gave birth to their first child, a sturdy son they named Luke, in honor of Ruby's late father, Silas Lane's dearest friend. 2 years later, little June Maddox arrived, named lovingly after Ada herself. The children thrived, wrapped in the affection of parents and townsfolk who had watched their love story unfold. On their 5th anniversary, Clay closed the store early and led Ruby on horseback to a high ridge overlooking the valley. A picnic waited, and together they watched the sunset burn gold and rose across the peaks. Do you ever miss it? Ruby asked softly. The wandering. The old adventures. Not for a single moment, Clay said, drawing her close. Everything I've ever wanted is right here. He kissed the top of her head. Besides, raising 2 lively young ones with you is adventure enough. Ruby laughed, her voice floating on the evening air. True. I caught Luke trying to show June how to use your old revolver yesterday. He what? Clay sat upright. Don't worry, it wasn't loaded, and I explained that 6-year-olds don't get to play outlaw no matter how much they want to be like their papa. Clay shook his head with a chuckle, then gathered her closer, the setting sun painting them in warm light. In that quiet, Ruby knew the restless cowboy she'd once met on a dusty morning had found his forever home in her heart, in their family, and in the wide, untamed West they now called theirs. Clay Maddox chuckled and shook his head, a wry smile tugging at his mouth. That boy's bound to turn my hair gray before I hit 40. Ruby Lane reached up to thread her fingers through his still golden hair. I think you'll look mighty distinguished with Silver Streak's perfect sheriff material. Sheriff, huh? Clay's brows lifted with amusement. Beck did mention retiring next year, and everyone already knows you're the obvious choice to take his place, Ruby said with quiet certainty. This town trusts you, Clay. Folks have long since let go of any old whispers about your past. They see you for who you are, a good man, a fair lawman, a loving husband and father. He gazed at her, still amazed that after all these years she could leave him breathless. None of it would have happened without you. You gave me a reason to be better, to build something lasting. We built it together, she corrected gently, resting her palm against his cheek. And we'll keep on building day by day. As the last streaks of sunlight slipped behind the mountains, Clay drew Ruby into a kiss that carried all the warmth of their first and the depth of every joy and trial they had faced side by side. Later, riding home beneath a sky thick with stars, Clay stole a glance at his wife. Moonlight traced the curve of her face, and gratitude surged through him as fierce as it had on the day they first met. Every day for 5 years he'd thanked the chance that had led him to Silver Creek and to the quiet strength and steady smile that had become his true north. A man who had once lived by running and reinvention, Clay Maddox had found his constants the love of a remarkable woman, the laughter of their children, and the peace that came from finally truly coming home. And though every girl in town had once hoped for his famous smile, Clay knew he'd saved his heart for the only woman who had ever seen past the legend to the man beneath, and loved him completely. As Silver Creek flourished, so did the Maddox family. Luke and June were joined 3 years later by another son, Noah, whose arrival brought fresh joy and lively chaos. The mercantile grew too, adding a second story filled with books and school supplies, Ruby's proud project. When Marshal Troy Beck retired, the town elected Clay as sheriff, without hesitation, drawn to his calm judgment and hard-won compassion. Visitors often remarked on the striking sheriff and his beautiful wife, noticing how his eyes softened whenever Ruby entered a room, how his smile gentled in a way meant only for her, as if the two of them shared a quiet secret no one else could touch. And in truth they did. Only Clay and Ruby fully understood what they had forged together. A love born in danger, strengthened through every trial, and deepened by the steady march of years. From a single glance across a dusty street had come a life of shared dreams and steadfast devotion. Each spring, on the anniversary of the day, Clay first rode into Silver Creek. They closed the store early and took their children to the wildflower meadow where he had proposed. As the youngsters played in the grass, Clay would wrap Ruby in his arms and whisper the same vow he'd spoken on their wedding day. "You are my home. Ruby Maddox, yesterday, today, and all my tomorrows." And Ruby Hart, still fluttering at his touch, would rise on her toes to kiss her cowboy, certain that of all the smiles he had ever given, the ones he saved for her alone were the truest measure of the man she loved. In Silver Creek, their story became a favorite legend, the tale of the cowboy whose smile once set every heart racing, but who found his forever in the steadfast shopkeeper who never chased him. If this story has touched your heart, I invite you to stay with us to discover more true tales of the Wild West. Stories that honor resilience, tenderness, and the spirit that God placed in those who blazed the trail. Subscribe, share, leave your thoughts in the comments, and join us once again to journey across this untamed land. Thank you.